my name is Rosie and welcome to Rosie Roo Knits. I'm really excited about our video today. Today we are doing a yarn stash tour. Now I know what you're thinking. We are in my normal filming location. This is my living room and this is not where I keep my yarn. However, my yarn stash is very portable, so we will be doing a yarn stash tour even though we are in our normal location. Now, I want to give a disclaimer. I am not trying to shame any content creators with this video. This is a really nuanced subject, and the amount of yarn you keep in your yarn stash is a really personal thing. A lot of the videos you see online with people with huge yarn stashes are knitting full-time for their job, and that is not my case. I have a day job, and so my yarn stash is going to look very different from someone who is knitting full-time. Also, my husband is still in college and I'm a recent college graduate, and I do not have a lot of money to spend on yarn. As much as I would love to, I need to make sure that my hobby is knitting and not buying yarn. People always joke that they're two different hobbies, and for my finances, that's true. I try and knit on a budget and use what I have and not buy more than I will use. So this is a really nuanced subject. I'm not meaning to shame people. Just because I have a pretty small yarn stash does not mean that you have to have a small yarn stash or that everyone should have a small yarn stash. And maybe I'm saying this and my yarn stash is bigger than yours, and so there's no shame in that either. It's a personalized hobby and that's okay. All of that being said, I do think it's important to talk about overconsumption in the yarn community. I think it has become really normalized to have a giant yarn stash, especially they're just pretty. I love watching yarn stash video tours because they're pretty and it's aesthetically pleasing. However, some people have more yarn than they will use in a lifetime. I am going to link this video by Sean over. She is an Australian knitting YouTuber that I love watching her content, and she made a really great video about her yarn stash and the statistics behind it, and that it would take her years to go through her yarn stash and that she was buying faster than she could knit. And I think it was a really eye-opening video about overconsumption in the yarn community. Now again, I'm not trying to be preachy here about overconsumption. I just think knitting inherently is a more sustainable hobby because you're making garments and you're making slow fashion. You have to really think about what you're making, and to turn around and instantly buy more than you could use just doesn't sit well with me in the hobby and how I like to knit. So there's my disclaimer. Let's jump in. Here is my yarn stash. This is my container concept. If you watch any sort of minimalist content on YouTube, I'm sure you've heard that. I try and make sure my yarn does not exceed this box. So you can see about how big it is. Now, full disclosure, I have about 3 skeins that are not currently in this box. I have 1 skein of acrylic yarn. I do not keep my acrylic yarn, this is all natural fiber, and I keep my acrylic yarn in a drawer just in case someone wants to learn to knit. I don't really use acrylic much anymore. There's nothing against acrylic yarn, it just hurts my hands, and so I knit enough that ain't nobody got time for her hands, right? I have 2 other skeins that are currently in my freezer because I bought them secondhand and they are in quarantine before they join the rest of the box. So that being said, let's dive in. Here it is with the lid off. Can you tell? I really like white yarn. I use a lot of white. Right on top we have the yarn I just bought for my birthday. If you watched my most recent knitting podcast, I've gone over this. This is yarn for my Porcelain sweater by Lynette. I bought Cascade Heritage in this shade 5682 and in the shade 5604. Aren't those just lovely together? I have 3 skeins of this shade, and I have 1 and some change of a shade of this, of a skein of this shade. The reason I decided to go with sock yarn for the sweater, which is not something I would normally do, is because I like to try and use up my stash. I had some leftover skeins of this. Let me grab them. Here's the leftover of this. I have all of the exact amounts in my Ravelry. I'll put them up on the screen, but that's enough for the color work in the porcelain sweater. So I wanted to use up this yarn, and I think this was a great way to do it. And for the white shade, I had this much left. So I have 3 full skeins. No, that's incorrect. I have 2 full skeins of this and some change. So there are those. To go with those, I have Gepard Kid Seta in the shade 416. I also picked this because I had some in stash that was left over from my Sophie scarf, and I thought those would go well together. I bought 3 full skeins of this and then some change. And I also bought 1 skein of the Kid Seta in the shade 1010. And I think this goes amazing with this color. It's slightly lighter and slightly marled, which I think will give a gorgeous effect in the color work. I only bought 1 skein of this. I was right on the border of needing 2, and my local yarn shop always carries this, and so I figured I would get 1 because as you can tell, I really don't like leftovers. I like to use up all of my yarn if I can, and so I figured if I could get by with 1 skein I would, and if I needed to buy another, I'll go back and buy another skein. So that is my yarn for the porcelain sweater. Now my most recent acquisition, other than I have 1 skein of sock yarn for a gift knit for my mother-in-law for Christmas that is in my freezer, I have more Cascade Heritage. My local yarn shop carries a lot of Cascade yarn, and it's pretty inexpensive. As a newly graduated student with a husband in college, it's very cost effective. Sorry, this one's coming unwound. Now these are pretty small because I have been teaching my best friend Allison how to knit, and she really wanted to delve into colorwork mittens, and we decided to make matching mittens. And so we each bought 1 skein because the Cascade Heritage yarn comes in 100-gram skeins, and you only need 50 of each color for the patterns we were looking at, and so we split them. So we each got 50 grams. So these are 50-gram balls of Cascade Heritage. I will put up the shades. This is an off-white, so it's slightly different from the other one I have, and then this is one of their red shades. It's just this beautiful red, and I will be making this pattern I cannot remember the name of, so all of the information will be there. So these will probably be after my porcelain sweater, but we'll see. The next yarn in my stash is this Cascade, again, 220 Superwash yarn. This I bought second hand off of Ravelry. I have 1 skein of this that is still in the freezer, so that's my 3rd skein that is not in this box. This is being used right now in one of my whips. I'm using it for my Lumi sweater, and so if you're interested in seeing what that looks like, I talked all about it in my most recent video podcast, but this is 1 more skein that I have for that project, so that is in my yarn stash. The next yarn in my stash is this almost full skein of Drops Air. Now I used this in my step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller, and I barely cracked into this. I didn't even take the label off. So this is very slightly less than 50 grams. I am unsure what I will use this for. I will probably end up buying more of this yarn to maybe make the waffle loop sweater by Other Loops. I really love this project that somebody made, and I'm very inspired by that. If I do make that, I might change the cable pattern slightly. I don't love that they go away from each other, and I think maybe I would just do normal cables just to make a bit more of a staple, but I think this fluffy drops yarn would just be wonderful for that pattern. But I only have 1 skein right now, and I'm not going to buy the yarn for that until I'm sure that I'm going to make it, because this could be many things. So that is in my stash. I also have in my stash more Cascade 220 Superwash Merino. This is from my local yarn shop. This is in the shade 25. I have one skein and some change. This is left over from my Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindberg. I had this left over plus another slightly bigger ball, and I used up most of that in my Lumi sweater so far. And when I started the Lumi sweater, I bought one more skein of the same dye lot just in case. I don't think I'll crack into this skein, so I think this will be stash yarn. I think I can get through the Lumi sweater. I have this and still quite a bit of the other ball left, and I only need to do the color work on the sleeves, so I really don't anticipate having to use this for my Lumi sweater. I don't know what this will end up being, but this is a yarn that could be many things. It's white. It could be anything. So this will be used someday. Also in my stash, I have this KNNC Cloudpaca yarn left over from my step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller. I am waiting to make something out of this because I want to see if I need to add more length to the sweater. The more I put it on, the more I think it's actually okay lengthwise. However, I finished it in May and I haven't really worn it. It's been too hot to wear it for an entire day. And so I may want to add more length. So I'm saving this to see if I need to add more length to that sweater. If I don't know what this will be. It's almost enough for these mittens I've thought about, but I actually don't think it would be enough. It's so soft. I love this alpaca yarn. It's very similar to Drops Air. I held it with Drops Air for the step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller. I might make a baby knit out of this, although I'm worried about the little hairs for a baby knit for one of my nephews. So I'm not sure what this will be. If you have ideas, let me know. I will put up how many grams it is here. But that is Cloudpaca. I bought this when Joann's had its closing sale. Also in my stash, I have one full ball of Drops Belle. This is color 26. And then I have an almost full ball left of it. And then also some scraps. I'm saving these because I have some other Drops Belle. I have some Drops Belle in this moss green color and in this light blue color and in this navy blue color. And these are left over from the sweater I am wearing. This is my stripe hype sweater by Veronica Lindberg. I knit it in the size medium, and I used leftover Drops Belle from my, I call it my Leontine lookalike sweater because it looks like a Cezanne Leontine sweater, but it had a different name, and I will put that up here. But this is leftover from, I had leftovers from that project, and so then I made this project, but now I have leftovers from that project. And I really do believe in trying to use up all of my yarn. And so I am tentatively thinking of making a baby romper out of this. I do not have a baby, I am not pregnant, but I do have 3 nephews and all of my siblings are still having kids, and I hope to have a kid sometime in the future, and so I think it'd be cute to match one of my nephews or my own child. And so there's not enough to make much else out of this, and I think that would be a great baby knit. Next in my stash, I have some universal yarn left over. There's one more color, this green. These are left over from my I'm So Tulip socks that I made. I had originally planned on doing 2 rows of flowers, one in pink and one in yellow, but then I liked how it looked with just the pink. So I have this whole 25-gram yellow skein. I have not used this for anything. I might use this in my Lumi socks that I make for my mother-in-law, just for the stripes or the vine motif. I'm not sure, but I have a lot of things saved on Ravelry that could use this scrap sock yarn. I might be able to get ankle socks out of this yellow, but 25 grams, I really don't think so. So we will see what these end up being. I've seen a strawberry bag charm that maybe I would make using this pink and green. And honestly, the yellow duplicate stitch instead of beads could be really cute. I also could make a baby knit or a hat or something, but that is actually the last yarn. Oh my goodness, that's everything. This is the last of my yarn stash. I hope that wasn't too anticlimactic for you. I know that there are some huge yarn stashes on YouTube and they're so entertaining to watch, but this is just a little more realistic for me and my knitting budget and time. This is a lot of knitting. Even just here, there's the baby rompers and a bag charm and maybe another sweater out of there and my porcelain sweater, and so there's a lot to do and I am excited to knit it down so then I can get more yarn and plan for more projects. So thank you for watching my video today and I hope you have a wonderful day and see you again soon.